Welcome to the Kenoi Church Podcast. We're glad that you're interested in connecting through this teaching time. If you'd like to connect further, feel free to reach out to us through our website, kenoichurch.org. For now, enjoy this teaching from Kenoi Church, where our mission is to lead people into a growing relationship with Jesus Christ.
Last week, I got to share with you the picture of John's vision in Revelation that paints for us what it looks like when peace is restored and God's kingdom fully reigns. But I also said that we're not there yet. We're somewhere between the garden in Genesis and a city in Revelation. There's some peace on earth, but it's not fully restored. There's salvation, but it isn't fully realized, which means that in this world, in this life, we experience brokenness and hardship, pain and suffering. It's here. And the honest truth is, it's easy for us to sort of tamp it down and put it to the side, especially when we come to church on a Sunday. We can pretend it's all good. We can focus on sort of the pretty pictures of the kingdom, the nice teachings of Jesus. Or we can do what we've chosen to do this year. Make it a regular rhythm to just recognize that there's very real grief, very real pain, very real hardship in this world and in our actual lives so that we can make space for it. I think it's important to give ourselves space to experience our grief, to cry out to God in times that we need to do so. And hopefully these things don't sneak up on you. We write them down on the whiteboard. We try to announce them ahead of time so you're not blindsided when you come in. But sometimes we are in a place of frustration or disappointment with God. I think it's important to know that, again, that's not supposed to be the final destination on the journey, right? But I also think that we should realize that how long it takes for us to get through that stop is not up for me to tell you. It takes different people different time. It takes different people different time. I want to frame this morning as the final message about peace on our series about peace. So from lament to peace this morning. And this morning I want to give you a little bit more testimony than I want to give you like an intellectual diatribe on the subject matter. Before Krista and I adopted our 4 beautiful children, we lost 2 daughters to a rare genetic condition. Some of you know this, and some of you don't, because I haven't talked about it for quite a while. At the time that we lost our 2 daughters, we were one of 6 families in the world that had this genetic condition. And so to say it's rare might be a bit of an understatement. When our first daughter was born, we had no idea what was wrong, and neither did the doctors. They'd never seen anything quite like it, and during the pregnancy, every test they had done had appeared just fine. So it was a total surprise when she was born that there was anything wrong. All that we knew was that our daughter Sage couldn't eat or breathe or react to things like a normal, typical baby would do. And the doctors lacked any confidence that without a miracle, she'd ever lead a normal life. And some of them lacked any confidence that she'd ever leave the hospital either. It took quite a while to diagnose the problem because it was so rare. And so for a while in the beginning, we were just going by day, trying to live in the moment, spend as much time with her as possible in the hospital. And to keep our friends and our family and our church up to date, we would send them updates. And those updates became like a journal for us. One day, I was reflecting on Genesis chapter 22, where Abraham was asked to sacrifice his son. The thing about this story is that Abraham and his wife Sarah, if you're familiar with it, you know this, but if you're not, totally fine. Abraham and his wife Sarah, they had waited very, very long for a child. That's the big thing about this couple. They prayed and prayed and prayed for a baby, and they just couldn't seem to have one. And so when they finally did have a baby, it was a big deal, right? I resonated with that because I'd waited a long time to get married. But I always wanted to be a dad. For as long as I could remember, I wanted to be a dad. I'd been in youth ministry for years and years in a whole bunch of different ways. I really liked kids, and I wanted to be a dad. Abraham had this long, multiple-day journey to this mountain where God had called him to go. And he had to go to this specific mountain and take his son with him, knowing full well what he was supposed to do when he got to that mountain. But his son didn't know. He climbed that mountain, and he built an altar, and he bound his son. He placed his son on the altar, and he raised a knife, prepared to kill his son. And at the last moment, an angel steps in and stops him. And our scriptures commend Abraham for his faith, for holding nothing back from God, even the thing that he values the most, his child. And so Abraham names the mountain, "The Lord will provide on the mountain." And so after reading this one day, I wrote this in the journal. This was on November 13th, 2012. Sage, our daughter, was 4 days old. It was 13 years ago. I said, I think there's a part of me that wants to believe that if I see this portion of the journey with my daughter through, that the angel of the Lord will step in and make everything right. But that's a version of the prosperity gospel that has no biblical foundation. Rather, I need to see each moment through. I need to have the faith of Abraham today, in this minute, in this situation, with the wisdom of Jesus. I need to let tomorrow worry about itself. I must do it without the expectation of God to owe me something, but with the expectation that God can do anything. It was a mountain that Abraham traveled to, an uphill journey over rocks and boulders, around trees and thickets, carrying wood and traveling with a child. Not easy. This is life, daily life for many. But something that Abraham discovered is something that I too am discovering. The Lord will provide on the mountain. I'm hurting, I'm tired, I'm worried, but blanketing all of that is a peace that I cannot understand. One that wrapped me up last night as I fell asleep holding my wife. One that tells me that I have a great big loving God. And if I believe all of this, I can trust that he has Sage, Carissa, and I in his hands. That he has found us worthy and capable of this journey to the mountain. That we have in him what we need. I read that part of the journal this week in preparation for this sermon. As I read it, I felt a little bit out of body, to be honest. I felt like I was reading somebody else's words. I called up my counselor and talked with him about it a little bit. And I told him that. I said, it felt like I was reading somebody else's words. And he said, Nick, you were. That was Nick 13 years ago. And my counselor, who's also experienced significant loss in his life, he said, God gives us courage when we need it. It doesn't have to feel like you for it to have been you. We trusted in the goodness of God, and yet Sage died. We maintained our faith, and yet she took her last breath in our arms. We declared that the Lord will provide on the mountain, and yet somehow it felt like the provision was absent. A year after that, we had a miscarriage. It was a little boy. And a year after that, we had another little girl who was born to us. Her name was Micah. And during that pregnancy, we did all kinds of tests, extra appointments, extra scans to make sure that the same thing wouldn't happen again because we were technically a high-risk pregnancy. And every test came back normal. Every green light and thumbs up you can imagine. But at 36 weeks, there was an emergency C-section, and our worst fears were realized. Micah had the same condition. 2 years earlier, the doctors told us that Sage's condition was just a weird, random thing that couldn't ever happen again. Super rare. It's like a lightning strike. In fact, it's more rare than a lightning strike. But now with Micah having it, they were sure that it was some sort of genetic anomaly that we were passing on. Again, we journaled our updates to our family and our friends. And so one morning I was reading in Luke 18, where Jesus is headed to Jericho. And there's a blind beggar who's sitting by the road, and somebody mentions who's passing by. It's Jesus and his crew. And so the blind beggar begins to shout, "Jesus, have mercy on me." And all the people around the blind beggar shush him. They try to quiet him. Don't say anything. But this just makes him redouble his efforts. He just wants to be that much louder. Son of David, have mercy on me," he shouts, until there's just no way that Jesus won't stop. And so Jesus comes over to him, kneels down beside him, and says to him, "What would you have me do for you?" The blind beggar, he could have asked for anything that he wanted in that moment, right? Jesus says, "What would you have me do for you?" He's blind, he's a beggar, he's poor, right? He could have asked for a mansion, he could have asked for riches, but he asks for his eyesight. And Jesus says, "Sure, your faith has healed you." I wrote this after reading that. November 2nd, 2014, Micah's 4 days old. I wrote, "Hope is a dangerous thing, you see. Hope is that still small spark that lights a forest fire. Hope is the catalyst to movement. Hope is hard to kill. Hope is sometimes all we have. But the most dangerous thing about hope is that it leads to faith. And while hope is a precious and resilient entity, faith is often a fragile and frail being. We rely on hope and try to inspire hope and ask people to have hope, all while we dance carefully around faith. We protect faith. We put it somewhere it cannot be touched, marred, or broken. Hope is dangerous because it leads to faith, and what if our faith is not rewarded? What if the beggar called out and Jesus didn't hear? What if Jesus heard and didn't stand with him? What if Jesus stood with him and did not heal him? What then do we do with our faith? Honestly, the answer is quite simple. We guard it. We try so hard to quell our hope. We dilute hope with reality. It's too dangerous to let hope get started because hope tells us to shout until we're heard, to shout over those who tell us to hush, because hope leads to faith. I find myself in this very battle today. Should I even dare? Imagine if the blind beggar had shouted for Jesus before, despite the reality of his situation and any surrounding naysayers, and the outcome wasn't what he shouted for. And now the blind beggar is in round 2. Jesus is walking by again. Does he choose to shout? Does he want hope? Should he have faith? Micah died in our arms the day before Sage's birthday. And it broke us. It broke our family, our friends, so many people. And I won't speak for Carissa and how it affected her. I'll tell you that I couldn't pray for over a year. That's a tough thing to avoid when you're a pastor. It felt like the foundations of our lives were ripped away. How could we go through this again? How could the outcome be the same again? How could we shout and pray and cry and nothing changed? When we adopted our son, Eli, who you guys know, for the first 6 months, I didn't sleep through the night. I only sleep for about 5 hours normally anyway, but after about 2, my brain would wake me up with a terrible feeling. And I would run into his room, lean over the crib, and put my hand on him to make sure he was still breathing. Because I just did not trust that that precious life wasn't going to be gone. It took 6 months to sleep through the night. When we adopted our first daughter, Journey, who you know, I finally got to bring a little girl home from the hospital, which was magical. But as soon as she began moving under her own power beyond my eyesight, I began having overwhelming anxiety and panic attacks that something was going to happen to her because I didn't trust that there was any divine protection or provision for my children. We were just skating by. Hard as a pastor, right? Okay. I'm just being honest with you this morning. And then it finally happened. A normal doctor appointment, a potential lifelong, painstaking diagnosis for one of my children. So here we go again, right? I knew the other shoe was going to drop at some point, so it's time to be strong on the outside, faithful on the outside, stay calm, take it one step at a time. But on the inside, I am screaming. God, are you kidding me? This again? And you know what comes to my mind? This verse. Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny? Yet not one of them will fall to the ground outside of your Father's care. And even the very hairs on your head are all numbered, so don't be afraid. You are worth more than many sparrows. And it made me so angry when that came into my head. And of course, this came into my head, which is an old hymn called His Eye is on the Sparrow. Some of you might know it. Let not your heart be troubled, His tender word I hear, and resting on His goodness I lose my doubt and fear. Though by the path He leadeth, but one step I may see, His eye is on the sparrow, and I know He watches me. His eye is on the sparrow, and I know He watches me. In the midst of this moment and all the past moments, I got to be honest with you, Matthew 10 and His eye on the sparrow, it sounds like garbage to me. It feels like garbage to me. It just makes me feel frustrated and angry in my heart, and that isn't what's in my heart. I want to scream and I want to yell. This is not what I want to say to God. It's not what I want to sing to God. It's not what I feel right now at all. You know what I feel like? I feel like this sparrow. I lie awake. I've become like a sparrow alone on a roof. But there's not a song out there that fits the way I feel. So what I do with that, and this is what I want to share this morning, is I wrote my own. I wrote an anti-hymn. All right? I wrote my own version called Sparrow. It says this: His eye is on the sparrow and on the sparrow only. It feels like He has forgotten who He values most. He leaves me feeling discouraged, angry, and lonely. I've always played my part, for in Him I did boast. But my breath is gone from my chest, and my heart no longer beats. The words feel empty, the answers are gone, for the sparrow matters more than me. That's what I felt. That's what I wanted to cry out. That's what I wanted to sing. That is what I needed this time. I didn't need to shout from the rooftop some glowing recommendation, 5-star Yahoo review for Jesus. I needed a way to be honest. What good is a relationship if I can't be honest in it? I needed a way to lament and to share my grief. And I've sat on this and shared it with no one until today. So this isn't something that I was publishing or shouting from the rooftops. It's something I share with you only today so that you can know that I struggle, that I have pain in my own life, and we each need to figure out how it is that we can take that and be constructive with it. I needed to find a way to express it in the same way that so many before me have done. Habakkuk cries out, God, all I see is pain before me. How long, O Lord, must I look at that and wait for you to do something? David cries out, God, how long will you ignore my voice? Jesus cries out, Father, why have you forsaken me? Right? So many before me have cried out in these anguished, grieving words. I need the chance to be honest in that way as well. Those people simply had the courage to be honest before me. Years ago, firefighters were doing firefighting long before they had breathing apparatuses. Breathing apparatuses allow them to breathe oxygen when they go into a burning building. And before they had these breathing apparatuses, people were still stuck in burning buildings. If they saw someone stuck in a burning building, the firefighter would still run into the burning building even though they didn't have an oxygen mask to wear, trying to find the person and save the person. To anyone who was watching this act of heroism, it looked like they were breathing in the smoke that they were running into. It looked like, from an outside perspective, like they were eating the smoke. And so firefighters got the nickname smoke eaters. Now, to be trapped in a burning building must be the worst day of your life, probably, right? But think about it from the perspective of the person trapped inside and to see that figure coming through the flames. It looks like someone who is stronger than the flames is coming. It looks like someone who can breathe the thing or eat the smoke that is causing you not to breathe is coming. And they're coming to stand beside you in the midst of the thing that is hurting and killing you. That they're leading you out to life. There's an old Jewish story. Not scripture, mind you. Hear me? A story. An old Jewish story about Satan and Hades celebrating as Jesus is crucified. And Hades, the place, says to Satan, okay, so now what's the plan that he's dead? And Satan says, well, now that he's dead, we'll bring him here with all the others. And Hades gets really serious, and he says to Satan, no, don't do that. I don't think that's a good idea. Don't bring him here. And Satan says, well, why not? He's dead. We got him, man. We just crucified him on the cross. We got him on the ropes. It's all good. Let's just bring him here and stick him with all the other people. And Hades looks at him and goes, no. Have you heard what John the Baptist has been saying over there? And Satan kind of like tunes his ears, and he goes, what? No. And he starts to listen. And John the Baptist is in the back going, prepare you the way. Prepare you the way. He's coming. He's coming. And Satan goes, what in the world? And all of a sudden, there's this explosion of just massive, bright, white light, an earthquake, and Hades splits in half, and Jesus comes strolling in. Satan is knocked to the side, stunned. Jesus walks in, and he's holding the keys to death and Hades. And he walks all the way to the very back, the deepest, darkest corner. And he finds Adam and Eve, and he grabs them by the hands. And he picks them up. And he takes hold, and he starts walking them back out. And everybody else, from the beginning, starts walking behind them. And Jesus, over his shoulder, starts yelling to Satan, who's laying there stunned. Everything broken in the first Adam is being made whole in the last Adam. And I know that a single message doesn't make everything right for everyone. And I know that it doesn't solve all the problems or give all the answers for all the questions. But I've been stuck in a burning building that's felt a lot like hell. Trauma and the pain and the loss and the anger have left scars on me in so many ways and places. They've left their mark. And I've seen Jesus come to me again and again, eating up all that smoke, all that stuff that chokes out the life, all that stuff that feels like it's killing me and eating me up inside, walking in with the keys to take me out of the flames. God who put on flesh stands beside me in the flames. And that's a picture that is not just one from a story. It's not a picture that's just one that makes sense to me. It's one that we see in Scripture. And I have to say that I think God probably stood beside Abraham and Isaac and Habakkuk and David. And he stood beside Jesus on that cross. And when I held Sage and Micah and they breathed their last, it wasn't just Carissa's in my arms that they were in. When I run to Eli's crib in those first 6 months, it wasn't just my hand that was on his back. When I feel that anxiety and those panic attacks, it's not just taking deep breaths that help me calm down. Because Jesus holds the keys to death and Hades, but God is the author of life. And I don't stand before you today having simple answers for complicated things and difficult trauma. I stand before you as somebody who has got a lot of complicated questions and pain and scars from life. But I stand beside you as somebody who believes that this life has a purpose, whether I like the direction of it or not always. I don't have it all worked out, but I do believe that God doesn't waste 1 minute of it in his kingdom. I'm not alone, for there is one that stands beside me in the flames. I'm not alone, and there is a greater purpose for what we go through than simply pain or frustration or disappointment or trauma. And that's not an excuse. It's faith. In 2 Corinthians chapter 4, Paul writes these words. He says, "We now have this light shining in our hearts, but we ourselves are like fragile clay jars containing this great treasure. This makes it clear that our great power is from God and not from ourselves. We're pressed on every side by troubles, but we're not crushed. We are perplexed, but not driven to despair. We're hunted down, but never abandoned by God. We get knocked down, but we're not destroyed. Through suffering, our bodies continue to share in the death of Jesus, so that the life of Jesus may also be seen in our bodies." May we have the courage to endure the hardship, so that we have the courage to be examples of the life.
Hi, this is Pastor Nick. Thanks for listening. I hope something that you heard today was very helpful. If you want to connect with us further, feel free to check us out on Facebook, Instagram, or our website, congregational.org. Sure, I'm glad we're in this together.